So I normally don't do this type of video, but I just thought it'd be interesting to get a behind the scenes look, there we go, at how, I approach Magic and how I try and handle effects, right? So this is a behind the scenes look. I don't know why I'm butchering that all the time. Behind the scenes look at my Chicago opener performance back in 2nd of June, so June 2nd, depending on your region. But yeah, you can go check that out if you haven't already. The Chicago opener is basically public domain at this point. There are so many videos explaining why or like how they should do it. So it is just like a supplementary lesson, I guess, because I'm not going to be explaining this, but I am going to explain like my reasoning behind some of the things that I did and whatnot, right? But usually I don't actually do Chicago opener that much. It's mainly because I don't like the effect. The reason why I don't like the effect is because it feels too much like you're punching someone with magic, right? It feels too direct, right? There's no build up, there's no like plot around it. It's just like, here's your selection, it changes color, you have another card selected, it changes color again, right? There's no reason why it's sort of like that, right? So I normally don't do Chicago opener. It's sort of those things like the ACR where I don't do them, but I do like thinking a lot about them, right? So that's why I'm making this video. It's because then I could fully sort of approach it with you guys. So yeah, but before we begin, I do like to give a brief history lesson as to the Chicago opener. So as far as I know, the Chicago opener actually came from a person by the name of Al Leach, and as far as I know, he didn't really publish it until sort of like the 2000s, but I believe people around him actually saw him do it back in 1950, right? So back in 1950, he actually called it a hot card trick, right? So that is what the original name for Chicago opener was, right? A hot card trick, there it is. But it wasn't until I believe it was Frank Everhart actually, he didn't publish it, but Frank Garcia published Frank Everhart's effect called the Chicago Opener in his book $1 Million Card Secrets back in, 1972. So that was where Chicago Opener came from. But the reason why I think Chicago Opener actually sort of gained more popularity than a hot card trick in terms of like name is probably because, one, Frank Garcia was one of the most popular magicians, and the fact that his name was attached to it probably made Chicago opener sort of like the front page sort of deal. And also, like, again, Al Leach didn't really publish it, so there's sort of like, it sort of makes sense why Chicago opener became like the front page name for this type of effect. But there's actually a second name for the Chicago opener, which is called the Red Hot Mama. The Red Hot Mama actually came from James P. Ryan's lecture notes for bar magic. So was it lecture notes bar magic, I think, back in 1977. And over there he credited Al Leach, but he called it the Red Hot Mama instead of the hot card trick. So that's sort of why Red Hot Mama is also a name. But yeah, the original name was a hot card trick. So yeah. But yeah, let's get into dissecting my Chicago opener performance and why I did some of the things that I did. So yeah. So I want to show you a classic of magic, and this really is a classic magic because a lot of magicians before and after me have their own sort of presentation on the plot, right? But for now you're stuck with me, so good luck with that. But yeah, like any other good old card effect, involves a selection, so please whenever you... Okay, so over here you'll notice that I actually set card effect rather than card trick, and the reason why I said card effect is because I think that I don't like, well, first off, I don't like the word card trick, right? Card trick, well, tricks in general aren't necessarily good, right? Tricks involve trickery, right? You're tricking someone else. There's nothing good about tricking someone else. It's sort of like, it has this malicious like undertone, right? Because it's sort of like, yeah, here, you're tricked, ha, get wrecked, scrub, or something like that, right? So there's a reason why I'm not necessarily the biggest fan of trick And also there's this association with like party tricks, right? Or like bar tricks, right? There's just like, or bar bets, I guess. Right? Tricks are like, party tricks. There's something that like, here's for fun. Yeah, here's something that's like fun to show, right? It's like that's not really something that I want to, be associated with, because magic is magic, right? It's not necessarily just for, reactions, not just necessarily for, showing off to people, right? So that's why I'm not necessarily the biggest fan of card trick. But card effect, again, effects, it's like on a deeper level. You're affecting someone on how they think, how they like perceive, right? So you're removing yourself from this like bad connotation of bad of trickery, right? Now you're affecting them in like a deeper level rather than like tricking them, if that makes sense, I guess. And also let me just go play back. A classic of magic, and this really is a classic magic because a lot of magicians before and after me have their own sort of presentation on the plot, right? But for now you're stuck with me. Right, so over here, I just said like magicians before and after me will have their own sort of presentation. Again, this plays into the part where it's like, oh yeah, this is just like a classic plot. But again, this is basically solidifying that, this is me. This is how I like to do this effect. Even if you see someone do something similar, it won't be the same. So that's why I'm doing that. And in the beginning, you can actually see me shuffling the cards once. And that's it, right? So this is just like a very open, a very casual gesture of me just shuffling the cards and doing like nothing else with it. So magic, because this is just like a display of like fairness, right? Because I'm just doing that. And it's just like, yeah, here's just the cards, I'm just shuffling it, pay no attention to it because, I'm just shuffling it. So again, this acts as like a display of fairness and also like casualness, because I'm really nonchalant about it. I just do it and it's just like, yeah, that's just whatever. So that's why I just sort of shuffled it. I could have shuffled it more, but I don't really care because that's, it's just like, boop, that's it. So that's how I like to treat magic. It is a more Spanish style of handling things, but the Spanish style of magic is pretty good. So yeah, and after me have their own sort of with that. But yeah, like any other good old card effect, involves a selection. So please, whenever you want, call it stop. So over here you can see how messy it is. Again, this leads back to the Spanish style of magic of everything being careless and everything being like, open, and it's just whatever, right? It's just casual sort of handling cards. And you won't like to stop over here, which is just, so over here you'll see how like brusque, how I break cadence with how fast I sort of do things. So the reason why I actually do this is to match with the force that I do later on, and you'll see that on screen right now or something like that. But yeah, so in Erdnase actually speaks about the consistency in motion, consistency in action. So this mainly refers to like false shuffles, false deals, and whatnot, but this also I think applies to magic in general. So when he speaks about consistency in action, he means like your false deals or your false shuffles should look like your real shuffles or your real deals, or vice versa. So your real deals look like your false shuffles or false deals. So then when someone calls you out on it, it looks the exact same. So then they can't tell the difference between what's real and what's false, and that hides a lot of discrepancies, right? Because now your real one looks like your false one, so then they can't tell the difference, right? So that is why consistency in motion is part of what makes magic natural, I think. So that's why this selection process is the exact same as my force process. Perfect, right? And as per usual, you have freely selected any of these cards. So the reason why I actually did this and I decided to fill up the frame with it is because for the force later on, if I was to do that in real life, I wouldn't use that type of force. I would do something that was more misdirection based. So over here, I'm filling up the frame just so then one, they can't see the selection, right? It's behind them. And also two, right? Now their focus is over there. So then they'll forget about the force card that I don't usually do in that manner. Usually I would do like a force that's more misdirection based, so this plays a part in how the misdirection works. But again, I want it to be consistent, so I want this selection process to play out the exact same way as my force process. So over here I'm doing the exact same thing as how I would do my force, so that's why I'm doing this, even though this is not really necessary. But again, this helps with the fairness, I guess, if that's what you really call it, which is like a normal deck of cards, I guess. And over here I said normal deck of cards. Again, this plays into the pattern of, it's clearly a marked deck, but it's whatever, right? So yeah. Please remember this selection, because if you don't, well, the effect is going to become very awkward and it won't work. So yeah. So we'll just leave it in the center of the deck as. So over here, you actually notice that this is where the main sort of handling sort of diverts from the main Chicago opener type of effect, right? So usually when you do Chicago opener, you would have the selection go on top of the deck, and then you would have the color changing deck, the different colored back on the bottom of the deck, and then you would give the cards a cut and then reveal that the cards actually changed color, right? And that's not good for me, right? For me, that feels too obvious, because now they're linking the cut to the change, because immediately after the cut, the cards change color. So I feel like that's too direct. That feels too, there's too much of a correlation between both of those. And that's why I decided to do this, where I made the selection process part of the losing process. So the reason why it feels clunky in the original one is because you're having the selection process, right? And then the losing process is distinctly different from the selection process. And then the change is directly related with the losing process, right? Over here, I'm actually basically doing the selection process and then the losing process in one beat, and then the change in the second beat, right? In the original, it was the selection, right? And then in a different beat, the losing process and then the change, right? And that's why I'm not necessarily the biggest fan of that. So we'll just leave it in the center. Right. So basically, this replaces the cutting action, right, by just losing the card in the side of the center of the deck, right? So that's why I decided to do that. This feels a lot more casual and a lot more open versus having the selection on top, giving a cut, and then revealing it to change, right? So that's why I decided to do this sort of selection process. The deck as per usual, and yeah, that's just like a dribble subtlety. Again, this is like here it didn't change yet, so that's why I want to again, this plays a role in separating the two beats of selection, losing the card, and then the change. So that's why I sort of wanted to do that. But the problem with me claiming that this is a normal deck of cards is actually flawed, because as a matter of fact, this is not a normal deck of cards. It's actually marked. And by marked, I mean that, magicians actually have decks of cards that can tell you the identity of a card. This can include your selection. Sometimes these markings can be a bit more subtle. Sometimes these markings can be, they can be very obvious. Also, notice how it said like these markings can, tell the identity of a card, including your selection. So again, I'm already sort of building up to the fact that, I already know your selection, right? And then I say like, this marking system can be very obvious, and then poof, it's red. So yeah. Like this one red card in this sort of sea of blue, which is very interesting. And so for the first time, what is actually your card? So I actually say for the first time, what is your card, and then I do the double lift. So if you're planning on using something similar, it's I say that just so then they look up and then they say their card. So during that process, you can actually get a pinky count. So if you're having trouble with a pinky count or having trouble with your double lift, during that time when they look up and do whatever, then you can get your pinky count and then you could get your double. So that acts as a sort of misdirection moment for them to look up, say their card, look down, and then it's your selection. So it does play a role in sort of the timing, right? On the other hand, I can't really do that because I'm on camera. But yeah, if I did like a pinky count or whatever for my double, then I would place it like around here. For the first time, what is actually your card? So when I'm waiting for them to answer, I do my pinky count and then a double. So, but I don't do a pinky count double lift type of deal. So that doesn't apply to me. But if it does apply to you, then you can do that. The two of diamonds. All right, that's perfect because that is, as a matter of fact, the only red card in this sea of blue, right? And also, you'll notice because right. So if you know the setup for Chicago opener, you'll know that now my force card is right above of this red card. Right, you can't actually see my mouse, but you'll know that my selection is actually right on top of the red card right over there. And the fact that I peel everything off from below of that card means that now the selection is back on the bottom, right? So instead of needing to do like a whole clunky thing again, here this is part of the revelation of the red card, right? So this displacement is part of the revelation, and that's why I sort of like it, right? So the bottom card right there, so the bottom card of the spread right there is the force card. Whoops. Which is very interesting because that is as a sea of blue. Right. And you'll notice that now, hold up. A sea of blue. And you'll notice that over here, because that is, as a matter of fact, the only red card. You'll notice that over here, I just placed a packet directly back on top. So now the force card is now back out on the bottom. So again, this is basically, straightens out the entire, selection process and replacement process of like the force card and whatnot. So that's why I like it. And also feels part of it because I need to, complete everything to, close everything. So, it's, yeah. But maybe that was just a fluke, right? Maybe that was... There's a second shuffle. Again, this is almost like it replays the entire plot again, right? Again, there's the red card. But if you actually see the beginning of the routine over here, so it's basically the exact same thing, right? I'm shuffling the cards again. Is a classic magic because and then I am doing I'm shuffling the cards maybe again. That was just I don't know, the deck acting up, maybe you know. And again, I'm not doing anything with it besides that one shuffle. Subtle, right? It's not supposed to be like one gigantic red card. So we'll do it again, right? So and then I'm doing the exact same selection process. So this feels the exact same as the first one versus the except that there's a red card now. But if you'll notice that for a lot of Chicago opener effects, they changed the selection process, right? They change it to suddenly a Hindu shuffle because they need to force that bottom card in a much more casual manner. But again, I didn't like that. And again, Erne speaks about the consistency in action. And so I'm doing that exactly, basically to a T. If I was to do this in real life, usually I would move the red card a bit further, right? I can't really do that right now, but I would move it to where just the peripheral can see it, right? So it's just basically a blur, but they don't really pay attention to it. They can still see it, but they don't care about it, right? And the reason why I would do that is because it still remains in full view, but again, there's not really like attention drawn to it. Over here, it feels too much like it's still part of the frame. So if I was in real life, I would still have, so my performing space would be here. I would usually have like the red card like outside of it just a bit. So it would be outside the frame a bit. And the reason why I'm doing that is because this is like, yeah, this card's done. It's done, you can move on and just focus on what I'm saying right now. And so I think that helps a lot with how bringing back the relevance of the red card later on. So it sort of hits harder, I guess. It's like that thing that you thought was done, it suddenly has more relevance, and that plays a bigger punch into the kicker ending. And so I want that to be sort of out of frame, right? But again, this is social media. I can't have it be out of frame. So yeah. Whenever you want, call out stop. Right, so we'll call it stop over here, which is just perfect. Right, so over here, that was the force card. that was the forcing process. Usually I wouldn't do that. Usually I would do something that's more misdirection based, again, like I said in the original like a couple of minutes back. But what I did was actually something by Ed Marlowe. That was something called The Easy Way, and it was a bottom deal for the millions, which was first published in Facsimile issue 3 back in 1995. So that is the force that I sort of did, but yeah. And you'll notice how the cadence, sorry, let me
you want call out stop, right? So you want to call it stop over here, which is just perfect.
So you'll notice that the cadence is the exact same as the original one, right? As the actual selection
over here, which is just perfect, right?
And again, right down to this,
freely selected.
Right down to this, it's basically the exact same motions, and even immediately after,
For usually have selected
it's handled
any
the exact same way.
Red card. So we'll do it again, right? So please, whenever you want, call out stop, right? So we'll call it stop over here, which is just perfect, right? But yeah, as per usual, you have selected any of these cards, which is just perfectly fine. So please remember your card, because if you don't, well, again, this effect is going to be very awkward and it won't work. Starting to have a feeling of deja vu.
Right, so I just said that like deja vu, like, you know, this is too similar, you know, this is too similar. So now this is basically a false sense of security where like this is going to play out exactly like how you thought it would be. So yeah, and then that, I think that plays a big role into the kicker ending. So yeah,
maybe we are repeating ourselves, but that's fine. So as per usual, we're going to lose it in the center of the deck.
I do the exact same thing over there. I do the same dribble subtlety, except now I can dribble a lot more of the deck, but I still don't do that because, again, consistency of motion, and so, you know, I want it to, you know, remain the exact same.
System will eventually kick in, but yeah. Now, if we just spread out the deck, we can actually see that your card, which was the Jack of Diamonds, the Jack of Diamonds is now the only red card in the deck.
Right, so over here, you'll notice that I actually pause a bit.
We can actually see that your card, which was...
Right, so over here, that's the pause of, you know, of letting them know, like, oh yeah, the Jack of Diamonds is going to be later on in the spread. It's going to be there as I spread a bit more, and so, but it doesn't come, so.
The Jack of Diamonds, the Jack of Diamonds.
And you'll notice how I actually don't spend too much time looking for the card, right? So
it's now the only red card in the deck.
Right, so I don't spend too much time looking for the card because I think that the spectator at this point knows, like, there's no red card except for that one clearly in view. So I think that plays a role, because again, you don't want to oversell the fact that there's no red card over there, right? Because at some point you're either going to look really stupid or people are going to know that you're badly acting, right? So that's why I moved away from it really fast, right? So I paused at the Jack of Diamonds, so I paused at like them having the card like named out, and I spread it out, and then that's when they first register that there's no red card. So over here they're scanning the spread as they look through the deck, right? As they look for the red card, right? I pause over here to ask for Jack of Diamonds, so then they can sort of expect their card to be, you know, in the upper spread.
The Jack of Diamonds, the Jack.
And over here it pauses, and then they can see there's no red card.
Of Diamonds is now the only.
And over here I search just a bit, right? Just a bit to be like, there really is no red card unless, right? So this is sort of leading them onto that same conclusion. So I sort of want everyone to sort of arrive at the same conclusion at the same time, right? So it's sort of like me and them discovering, oh, it's the red card over there, right? So it's sort of there at the same time, right? So we all sort of look at the same card at the same time. So that's sort of like how I want it to be sort of timed.
Red card in the deck, and that is a classic of Magic.
Right, so I think that was it for for this one, I think. But again, I don't really have a script for things. I just have bullet points. So bullet points are just ways that are just beats that should hit at specific moments. And the reason why I do that is so then I can improvise around those beats, right? If I have like a full-on script, I feel like I would become too rigid and too over dependent on that one script. So whenever something happens that isn't necessarily like part of the script, usually I would like freeze up and whatnot. So I do want to have space to sort of improvise and work around that, and that's why I just have bullet points. So yeah, so the main bullet points I have was for presenting, you know, just a classic effect. The other bullet point was
problem with me claiming that this is a normal deck of
there was a marked deck, and this is, you know, a that's the second bullet point. The other thing is
one red card in this sort of sea of blue, right?
Yeah, and then the other thing is just repeating it and then just having it timed. So those are just like I don't really have a lot of in-depth scripts, honestly, but yeah, that's basically how I processed it. But yeah, I hope that you learned something from this breakdown into how I like to you know, touch on things. So overall, I think they can see how much I tried to like smoothen the process, smoothen the selection process of the Chicago opener, smoothen out some of the more clunky bits of the Chicago opener. And so yeah, that includes the selection, the forcing process and whatnot, and how I want everything to sort of blend in, and I want like timing wise and whatnot and script wise, it's just sort of whatever, right? But yeah, I hope you guys learned something. If you guys are interested in the Chicago opener, Glenn West actually has a great video on the Chicago opener. Michael Amar has a video on the Chicago opener as well on Magic Stream, so Illusionist is a streaming service, so go ahead and look at that. But besides that, yeah, I think that does it for this breakdown on the Chicago opener. And so yeah, hope that you guys enjoyed, and stay healthy, stay safe, and see you guys next time.